want to jump in this morning by looking at one of my favorite texts in the New Testament, and it's found in Hebrews chapter 12, beginning in verse 1. And the author says this: "Therefore, since we also have such a large cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us lay aside every hindrance and the sin that so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that lies before us, keeping our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith." Now, what I love about this little section is that this author, this apostle, he calls all of us that are Christians, that have given our lives to Jesus, to use our imaginations and to think of life as one big race where we are all, as runners, running our own individual races. This is the picture he wants for us to have in mind. Now, I want to go on the record and tell you all that I really struggle with seeing myself as a runner, and it's because I hate running, okay? Now, to those of you that love long-distance running, I will say I have never understood you people. I doubt I ever will. Maybe it's that runner's high that you've experienced that I've never experienced, but unless there is a ball involved, and a basketball, baseball, football, even pickleball these days as I get older, I'm not interested in running. However, even though I'm not a runner, there are a couple of things that he describes that I do connect very deeply with. One of those is that when I think about my life, it oftentimes feels like I'm in a race. I feel like I'm racing around from one commitment to another commitment between all the demands on my life at work as well as at home, that I'm just constantly going. Life is coming at me at a blazing speed, and I'm just doing everything I can to try to keep up with the demands in my life. Now, before I say anything else, can any of you identify with that? Life is like a race. It's just coming at you so fast. You're just doing everything you can to keep up. Yeah. And then the other thing that I connect to is this word that he uses where he talks about endurance. Endurance. Another way to think of this is strength. That you have to have the endurance or the strength to be able to continue in this daily grind that we find ourselves in, running our race, dealing with all the pressures and the demands that we deal with day in and day out. And if we slip into a place where we have no endurance or strength and we're living from a place of weakness, then eventually over time, these pressures and demands will pile up on us and we will collapse under the weight of it. And that's really important for us to keep in mind today, given what we've been talking about as far as burnout is concerned. Because today what researchers tell us is that a lot of us as Americans are really struggling from this place of living our lives from a place of weakness instead of strength. Now, the way they speak to weakness is they describe them as symptoms of burnout. Symptoms of burnout. And if you haven't been with us throughout this series, I want to show you some of the main symptoms that they speak to today as being related to burnout. And you see up here on the screen everything from emotional and physical exhaustion, hypertension for any of you out there that have some heart challenges like this guy up here from time to time, anxiety, low mood, low motivation, and you can add to that a lack of fulfillment, a lack of feeling a meaning and purpose in life, and then also a lack of joy in life. That all of these are signs or symptoms of operating your life from a place of weakness, not strength. Now, what experts tell us is that when you begin to experience these symptoms, and they operate on a spectrum, but as they become more and more intense, what you need to do is you need to pause and you need to try to get down to the root cause of what's causing this, and you need to address them so that you can get back to living from a place of strength. Now, the advice that they give, the counsel they give generally, is that you need to begin looking at your lifestyle habits. You need to assess things about the way you're approaching life and your rhythms to see if you have those dialed in for health and for strength. They then also recommend that you possibly want to go and hire a professional counselor to help you clear up the mud in your life and maybe think through some other ways to think about and approach life and maybe learn a few skills along the way. And then in some cases, they even suggest that under a doctor's care, you may need to have some form of medical intervention, possibly some type of medication or things to get you through that rough patch. And so this is what they do. They typically say this is what you need to do to go from weakness and burnout back to a place of strength. But in my life, as I have been through seasons of burnout, and I think many of you would also attest to this, I have found their counsel to be very helpful. That as I've looked at my life in seasons of burnout and I had to address my lifestyle habits, that has helped me for sure. getting counsel from great counselors, even those that are not paid professionals, but people who know me, love me, and are very wise that can pour insights in my life. That is helpful. So I found all that to be true. However, in my journey, I've also learned that there is a different type of burnout that many of us are dealing with that researchers and experts do not speak to. And it's what I would call this burnout of the soul. It's where you're operating from a place of weakness at the depth of who you are. Because today, guys, we as human beings are created with a physical, material aspect to our existence, but also we have an immaterial aspect of our existence as well, the soul, the mind, the heart as well. And so together, we're not just material, we're spiritual as well. And what we oftentimes do is we ignore this spiritual part of our lives, and it's the deepest part of who we are, it's the soul. And according to Jesus, he says that is what we live life from. We express our thoughts, our words, and our actions from what's going on in here. And I believe that is what this author of Hebrews is speaking to when he said that you need endurance. And I want to show you why. Look with me again at the end of verse 1 through 2. He says, let us run with endurance the race that lies before us, keeping our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. What he is speaking to here regarding strength or endurance of the soul is not something that we can, in a physical sense, from anything or anyone else, draw strength from. That we're not able to do that. That for us to draw strength, he's saying for the soul, it is a thing of faith, and it is by us drawing it from Jesus. And the way he says we're to do that is pretty interesting. It's pretty creative. He said you are to keep your eyes on him. That it's by keeping your eyes on Jesus, you draw strength from him, endurance, to live the life God wants for you to live. Now, as we can probably figure out, all of you are probably ahead of me on this, it's impossible to physically fix your eyes on Jesus today, right? He's in heaven, we're here on earth. We can fix our eyes on each other, but we can't fix our eyes on Jesus physically. And thankfully, that's not what he's referencing. What he means by this is it's relational in nature. That daily you're to live your life in this close relationship with Jesus, processing life with him, praying to him, talking to him, looking to him for direction in your life. And by doing that, you draw this strength, this endurance that you need for life. Well, I believe all of that is important today because a lot of us today are operating from a place of weakness. And the reason is because we're just not very good at keeping our eyes on Jesus. We're just not very good at it. What we struggle with in our day-to-day lives is just kind of having our ideas and how we want to go about life and doing that and wandering off from Jesus and not talking to him and drawing strength from him. And it is in many ways leading to these symptoms of weakness that we're experiencing. The anxiety in our lives, the depression, the low mood, low motivation, physical, emotional exhaustion. A lot of that, guys, is coming from deep down in here. And so we can't just keep treating the physical symptoms. We have to deal with what's going on in our hearts. I find it interesting. Years ago, I read a quote in a book by C.S. Lewis that I think he really hits the nail on the head as he describes in his own words this idea of keeping your eyes on Jesus. And look with me at how he put this. He said, to have faith in Christ means, of course, trying to do all that he says. There would be no sense in saying you trusted a person if you would not take his advice. That's good, isn't it? That faith, to say you have faith in Jesus, to say you trust Jesus, is to actually do what he tells you to do. That it makes no sense to say, I believe in Jesus, I trust Jesus, I have faith in Jesus, but I even agree with Jesus, but I'm not going to do what he tells me to do. That's so important. And I believe that's what's happening in many of our lives today. We're not keeping our eyes on him. We're not looking to him. We're not doing what he tells us to do. And as a result, we're operating from a place of weakness. Well, this morning and the rest of our time together, what I want to speak to is a teaching by Jesus that's found in the Sermon on the Mount, where we were last week. And so if you want to follow along, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 6. That's where we're going to be. And this is a teaching where Jesus describes something, a subject, that many of us struggle with applying. That we're not taking his advice to heart. We're not living out what he says. And it is leading to where many of us are just getting absolutely destroyed. Maybe that's too strong of a word, but I think in a little bit you'll see what I'm saying. But we're getting wrecked because we're not listening to what he said. Now, before we look at this teaching, as a reminder, the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus spoke 2,000 years ago to all these people from the side of a mountain was under this theme of the blessed life. What he was sharing with everyone is that as sons and daughters of God, this is how you're to live life if you want to have a blessed life, where you want to be fulfilled, you want to have this peace and rest in the soul. This is what you need to do. And it's within that sermon, he said these words that are in Matthew chapter 6, beginning in verse 19. He said, "Don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves don't break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So I want for you to imagine something with me for just a moment. Imagine that sometime this week, you were able to spend an entire day with Jesus in the flesh. And so he went everywhere with you that day. He had breakfast with you. He was with you when you gave a hug or a kiss to your spouse before you ran off to take your kid to school. He went with you in the car drop-off line for the kids to drop them off at school. He went with you to work. He went everywhere you went that day. And imagine while you're spending this entire day with Jesus, he is asking you questions about this race that you live in your life and all the stress and all the pressures and all the burdens that you are feeling. And so you begin to talk to him about the stress and pressures of being married and just the things that you're wrestling with, the stress and pressures of being a parent, or if you're a student here today, just the pressures of being a student and dealing with your parents, right? It works in both directions. Imagine you talk to him about your work and the demands of work and the pressures you experience with your boss and all the things. And as he walks through all that with you, he then begins to talk to you about how you feel about financial pressure. And the first thing you say to him is, "Well, Jesus, everything is so daggum expensive these days." Now, can I get an amen on that from anyone? I thought I'd get one this morning for that, if nothing else. You're going to agree on that. Everything is so dang expensive. And you begin to tell him, "Man, when I go to the grocery store, I can't get 5 packs of bacon like I used to. I have to settle for 3, and it's triple the cost," right? Or when I go to buy clothes for myself or for my children, and they're growing an inch every week, it seems like, and having to buy more shoes and all these things, that my goodness, I can't buy what I used to. I can't hardly put gas in my car for less than $70, $80. And you were to go on and on and on. And then you would say, "So I have this pressure, but Jesus, that's not only it. I also have concerns about the future." And you begin to explain to him that as you're just trying to keep your head above water with the pressures of the now, you're also thinking about your retirement years and what would be, you hope to be your golden years, and that you're feeling this pressure about making sure you invest enough for that so that when you get to that point, you have enough money to put food on the table, but also take care of your medical needs and all of your needs and not have to worry about it. Now imagine Jesus said the words we just read to you on the other side of that. Look with me again at what he says. "Don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves don't break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." The reason why it's so important to think about what Jesus is saying here within that context is because that was the context in which he was speaking it from to these people that day. That in their day, my goodness, those people, you're talking about poverty, you're talking about just putting hand to mouth. Most of these people, that's where they lived. And so what Jesus was saying in the midst of this then, and he's saying it to all of us today, is, hey, I get it. I understand the financial pressure you feel in the now and the financial concerns you have about the future. But in the middle of this, here's what you must do. You need to guard your heart. You have got to guard your heart. You cannot give your heart away to financial opportunities, pursuing money with this belief that if you get more and accumulate more of, as he describes it, storing up treasure on earth where rust and moth destroy and where thieves can break in and steal. But instead, he says, you take your heart and you give it to God. That God becomes your treasure and that you are focused on treasure in heaven. Here recently I've been reading a book, and it's a book by Arthur Brooks, Dr. Arthur Brooks, who is a well-known author, a New York Times bestseller author. And the book I've been reading is entitled The Happiness Files. And you can see a picture of it here. And it is a compilation of essays that Arthur Brooks wrote over the years talking about happiness and everything from career to family to all these subjects, but there's also some chapters where he writes about the research that's being performed and what they're discovering about money and happiness. And in one of his chapters, he wrote a description of some research that to me is pretty interesting, and it seems to align very closely to what Jesus was teaching and what we just looked at. And I want to show you this quote. Look at this with me. A far smaller portion of Americans, 11.4%, according to 2020 data from the U.S. Census, live in poverty. And yet, according to a 2015 survey fielded by the financial management firm UBS, more than half of millennials with a net worth greater than $1 million feared losing their wealth a great deal or somewhat, as did more than a third of similarly wealthy baby boomers. For millions of people, then, worrying about money is not a reflection of whether their basic needs are being met. In fact, this anxiety reflects deeper concerns that money can't solve. Okay, now that's a lot to digest, so let me explain what he's saying here. Is that thankfully in our country, only about 11% of our country is below the poverty line. So the rest, 89%, is above the poverty line, thankfully. However, even for those that are above the poverty line, they have found in their research that millennials and baby boomers, and I'm sure this includes the X generation, which is my generation, all of these generations, that when they survey people that have a net worth of $1 million or more, that there are millions upon millions upon millions of people that say they still are stressed out about not having enough. And that's why what he said at the very end is so important. He says this anxiety that you have once you hit a certain financial level where your needs are met reveals something that money is actually not what you're really worried about. There's something else going on, and it's something that money and more money does not solve. And so that brings you back to what Jesus is saying. What Jesus is saying is that in the midst of all these things you're grappling with in life, that as you feel the pressures and the demands and the anxiety, you need to guard your heart, because your heart was not created to go after and try to find happiness and security in wealth. Your heart was designed to find happiness and security in your Heavenly Father who loves you and cares for you. You need to give your heart to Him. And then he goes on to add this, and this is powerful, verse 22. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. So if the light within you is darkness, how deep is that darkness? What he speaks to here is describing our hearts and how serious this is for our hearts by stating, think about someone that loses their ability to see as far as physically. That a person that's blind lives in a world of darkness. Everywhere they go, everything they do is dark. And he says, if you give your heart to this and you pursue the accumulation of treasure, of wealth here on this earth, what you're doing is you are giving your heart to darkness. And here's what's striking about what he's saying here. He calls it deep darkness. Now, guys, listen, you read the teachings of Jesus, the only time you see Jesus using terminology where he talks about deep darkness or outer darkness, he's talking about the subject of being eternally separated from God in hell. Jesus spoke about hell in that way, and there's a whole lot we talk about on another day on that. I'm not getting into that. But he was very serious as he warned about that, and here he is pointing to money, and you giving your heart to this, he's saying it is deep darkness. And as you all know probably, Jesus didn't run around like Chicken Little and saying the sky's falling about everything, did he? He didn't just willy-nilly throw out warnings and try to make everybody freak out. He was always trying to bring comfort to people. So when Jesus would say something like this, he's saying you need to take me seriously, because he wouldn't say it if it wasn't true. And then he closes his teaching by saying this: no one can serve two masters, since either he will hate one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. The reason why this is such a serious subject is because Jesus said when you take your heart and you choose whether to give it to the pursuit of treasure here or treasure in heaven, you're ultimately deciding who your master will be. That you're either looking to God to direct your life and let him master your life, or you're choosing to look to financial opportunities, the accumulation of wealth, and you're giving your heart there. And again, it's all about security and happiness. This fear of not having enough, the fear of missing out, as well as even just the overall happiness in your life. As I thought about just what Jesus warned of here and how serious it was, I began to think about a movie that I saw it a number of times years ago, maybe even in the past year or two. And just to tell you, whenever I begin to use illustrations from movies, my wife, Melissa, always gets really nervous, okay? And because she doesn't know what I'm going to say. And we'll see how she feels about this one. But I like to surprise her sometimes. But this movie is one that I think will help us better understand the warning that Jesus offered. And this is a movie that I'll go ahead and tell you that I believe is an American classic. And I, to this day, do not understand why it has not received the recognition, the accolades, the awards that it's missing. I just don't get it. And the name of the movie is Anchorman 2, for those of you that are curious. Yeah, now you know why Melissa doesn't want me sharing movie illustrations, right? The story of Ron Burgundy. Now, let me just ask, are there any of you in here that would admit you have seen either of the Anchorman movies? Any of you in here that would admit it? Okay, good. The first service, everybody didn't want to admit it, and I knew a lot of you have seen this movie. Well, this is the second movie, and there's a few scenes in this movie that I think will hopefully make this point clear. And so it begins when Ron Burgundy has hit rock bottom. He's blind. He's living out by the ocean. Some of you remember this. And he is just in a bad place. And one day he was out on the beach, and he discovered a little baby shark that got caught up in a shark net, and it was barely hanging on to life. And so Ron got this shark out, and he decided he was going to adopt this little baby shark. And so he gave him the name Dobie, okay? And so he began to nurse this shark back to health. You can see this picture here. Sorry for the quality of the pics, but this is him with a bottle feeding Dobie, okay? And he's blind here, okay? Again, it's a dumb movie, I know. But he nurses this shark back to health. He gets the shark to the point where it's good, it's recovered, and so he and his son one day decided reluctantly and with sadness in their hearts they were going to release Dobie back out into the ocean. And so they took Dobie out there, they cried and shared a few tears, and they waved to Dobie, never believing they would see him again. Well, you fast forward to the end of the movie, and all this that I'm telling you is probably the only thing worth watching the movie ever, I think. But you get to the end of the movie, and in the final scene, they're all out on the beach. There's a wedding, they're partying, they're having a good time with their friends, their family, and all these people. And then they spot Dobie returning to the beach. And so Ron turns, and he's so excited that Dobie's coming back, so he runs out into the water. He has a suit on. He swims as fast as he can to Dobie. He gets to Dobie. He kisses Dobie. And then this last picture, you can see what Dobie did to Ron. Dobie tried to eat Ron as an afternoon snack. He tried to absolutely take his life. And thankfully, because Ron had an amazing dog named Baxter, Baxter swims out there, he confronts Dobie, and he sends Dobie away, telling him never to return. End scene, that is the movie. Now, some of y'all are wondering, how in the world are you going to use this as an illustration? And again, this is why Melissa doesn't like for me to do this, but here we are, okay? So here is the point of that. Ron, on that day, made the foolish decision in believing that Dobie would not turn on him and try to destroy him. And so he approached him, and he dang near lost his life. What Jesus is saying, somewhat in a similar sense, of course not in a funny sense, but he's making the point that a lot of us, and it's true, are foolishly believing that money will not destroy you. That money is something you can control. It won't control you. It doesn't have your heart. It won't do that to your heart. It may do it to everybody else's hearts, but it won't do it to you. And what Jesus is saying is, oh, no. You are foolish to believe this. I know. This is a very, very serious thing. And here's the truth about today. If we're honest, and you can think about this in your own life, your own relationships, your own experiences, as well as even what you can read and research for yourself, is that there is a whole lot of this going on today where money has the hearts of people, and it is wrecking them. It's wrecking their marriages. It's one of the top 5 reasons that's cited today for divorce. Used to, years ago, it used to be number 1, but it's in the top, I think, 3 today, where it's the number 3 or so cited reason. It's the reason why a lot of us are unhealthy, and we're trying to numb ourselves and deal with the financial stress that we're dealing with by just over abusing alcohol and maybe other types of medications and drugs and things like that. It's splitting families up. It's causing a lot of pressure and tension for kids. We're just not healthy, guys. And it's because, as Jesus said, when it comes to money, we have bought into this lie that we can control it. It's going to give me security and happiness, and we've chosen a master that is wrecking us. And so what we need to do is we need to take his warning seriously, and we need to give our hearts back to God. Now, how do we do that? Well, thankfully, the Apostle Paul, in one of his letters, he wrote to Timothy, which was someone he had mentored, as well as he was a pastor of a church, a local church. He wrote some sections in his letter in 1 Timothy where he speaks to how you are to give your heart to God, how you're to lay up treasure in heaven. And I want to read with you what he writes in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17. He writes this: "Instruct those who are rich in the present age not to be arrogant or to set their hope on the uncertainty of wealth, but on God, who richly provides us with all things to enjoy. Instruct them to do what is good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and willing to share, storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of what is truly life." What I love about what Paul writes here is he says two things at the very end that he wanted for everyone to experience. And what he wrote is that this, by living out and doing what he describes, is what leads to you storing up treasure for yourself for the coming age. Now, guys, what he's referencing there is he's speaking to what Jesus said about the new heaven and the new earth, what Jesus was saying about storing up treasure in heaven. So he's saying if they do these things, you are laying up treasure for the coming age of the new heaven and the new earth. When Jesus returns, he renews and restores this world that we live in. He resurrects all of us and gives us life eternal with him and our Father and the Spirit, and we live out that life. So that's what he's talking about. And then the other thing he adds there at the end is he said, so that they may take hold of what is truly life. That this other is a lie. True life is laying up treasure in heaven. And then there's three things he said as he starts off this section that we have to do. The first thing he said is to not set your hope in the uncertainty of riches. Don't put your hope in the uncertainty of riches to give you security and happiness, but in God, who richly provides you with all things to enjoy. To put your hope in your Father. Your dad is the one that owns it all in the heavens. He's the one through whom his hands, his heart for you, every blessing you have, every dime you have has been given from him to you. And he gives it to you to enjoy it, which is kind of cool, isn't it? He's giving you all things to enjoy, but there's a way to enjoy it. And what he goes on to describe is we need to be rich in good works, that we need to serve. We need to do good things for other people, giving of our skills and our talent and our time to help other people. And then he also adds to that, that you need to be generous and willing to share. What Paul is speaking to here has been a practice all throughout Christianity from the very beginning. Jesus modeled it. Jesus taught it. The disciples, the apostles, all the first Christians modeled it, and that was that they would give. That they gave to people in need in their community. They gave to people in need in other communities. You see this in Corinthians, what Paul describes there about the Macedonians. And then they would also give to their local churches to provide a place for people to be able to come and to hear the gospel and to grow in their faith. And so this is what Paul said, that if you do this, you're storing up treasure in heaven, and that you are living life, like truly living life. For me, the way that this has been working in my life, and I'll just share a couple of the convictions with you that I've been walking through, is that I'm someone that loves to read and better understand global markets and investing and trading and all those things. And I know some of you are not interested in that type of stuff. It's just something I'm interested in. I've been interested in it for a while. And what God's been showing me is that I have this tendency to wake up every day with this belief that I just need to look at what's going on, and then whatever is obvious that I need to do, given what's there as far as financial opportunities, I take advantage of those opportunities. Does that make sense? And so this can apply to trading, buying, investing. It can also apply to your career and pursuing things and trying to go out and make it happen, if you will. Kill stuff, drag it home, that kind of thing, however you want to look at it. But what he's been showing me is that there is an order to money and financial decisions you make, and then God. And the order matters. That what I am to do every day is not have my default position, just get up, look at what's going on in the marketplace, and then just make decisions that to me seem to be smart, but I am to start by looking to my Father saying, you are my master. Your kingdom come, your will be done in my life today. Whatever you want me to do, I will do it. The order matters. So I give my heart to him while I'm also aware of what's taking place in the markets. The opposite is oftentimes true in my life, just being real. Likely this is true for you as well, where we are giving our hearts to money and we're doing these things and we're aware of God. Money's our master, we're aware of God, but he's not the one that's mastering or directing what we do. And so what I found is that sometimes when you give your heart to God and you say, God, whatever you want me to do as it pertains to money and the opportunities I pursue, is that there may be opportunities that on paper would say, you do this or you're a fool. And God says, no, I don't want you to do that. And so you turn away from certain opportunities because that's just not what he's telling you to do. And so that's the heart part of this. That's it. It starts there. It is hard to do, but you have to daily decide, does God have my heart or am I just going to control and based on financial opportunities? The second thing he has done in mine and Melissa's lives over the past 30 years together, we've been dating for 30 years, we've been married 28 years this August, is we have lived by the conviction that we are to give our first fruits to God in any and every local church that we've been a part of. Even when I wasn't pastoring, I was in the marketplace, that's what we did. And so we've lived by this principle that the first fruits goes to God, it goes to the church, and the reason for that is because the greatest need of any human being on planet Earth and in this community is at the soul level spiritually with God, to know God, to be reconciled to him as a son and a daughter through Jesus. And so we believe passionately that our first fruits are to be given to a local church so that we can continue to meet that spiritual need whatever church we're in the community. But secondly, another conviction we've had is that God also tells us, and we see this all through the scriptures, that there are physical needs that people have in our community and around the world as well. And these are simply where people do not have the resources we have. They can't put food on their table. They can't buy clothing, the medications that their kids need, or education. And so there's great organizations such as Compassion International, World Vision, lots of other ones that are out there that we've also, over these now 28 to 30 years together, have dedicated a percentage of our income to supporting those needs as well. And guys, and I said this in the first service, in case you didn't know, I have 5 kids. Okay? 5 kids ain't cheap. Not at all. 3 of them are adults now, or they say they're adults. I'm not sure if I believe them. Legally, they're adults. I love them all. We have one in high school, one in middle school. And on paper, just being real about it, especially as a preacher and not in the marketplace, it doesn't make sense that you can do all of that and still have enough for the now and have enough for the future. But I'll tell you, God has provided for us, and he takes care of us. And it's because he's my dad. He's our Father. And so this isn't easy. I'm just sharing with you what we've experienced. And many of you in here would probably have amazing stories as well that you could share from as well. So as I close this morning, I honestly want this for you. And so I have a couple questions I want to ask you to think about. First of all, when you think about your life, just being real with God, would you say that God is your master? That he is directing what you do financially? The way you see your money, the way you manage your money and your time? Or would you say that financial opportunity is your master? Which one? There's an order. One you have an awareness of, the other one is your master. Which one is your master? Which one is the awareness category? And if you're like me and you can honestly say, man, I struggle with God as my master every day, you need to get that right. And you need to daily just continue to turn your heart back to God. And sometimes it's multiple times a day, isn't it? Because we have a tendency to drift. But just keep coming back to him. Father, what do you want? It's not what I think and what I want. What do you want? The other question I have for you is, have you ever personally taken Jesus at his word and actually done what he says? Like C.S. Lewis said, you say you trust him, you check the box, you put on your Instagram, your profiles on Facebook and everything else that I'm a Christian, you put the little cross, emoji, the whole thing, but like really, do you actually do what he says? Or do you just agree with him that that's what you should do? And if you haven't, and especially in this area, why not try it? Why not say, okay, I'm all in? And really pray and ask him to give you the wisdom and the clarity on what he wants for you to do given your current situation with your time and helping other people and serving, as well as with your resources. Try that. And here's my belief, that you'll find in my experience, as I found in my experience, it is hard, it is stressful because it changes your lifestyle for sure, but there is so much more peace and joy as you wrestle through this faith experience with Jesus that on the other side of it, and even as you go through it, you see him show up in ways you go, wow, I'm so glad I'm doing this.